Well, when it comes to risks to our big game animals, and I'm talking specifically about deer, moose, elk, and even caribou, we have to talk about chronic wasting disease. But there's some interesting developments moving forward on this front, and a real pleasure to welcome Todd Zimmerlein, CEO and president of the Alberta Conservation Association. Todd, you guys, along with Alberta Environment and Parks in Saskatchewan, the provincial government there, are working on what I guess could be termed a vaccine for CWD.
Well, I would say we're taking the first steps towards that. It's certainly our hope to move towards an oral vaccine. But like I say, it's just starting, so there's a long ways to go.
Now, this conversation with chronic wasting disease has been a long one. It's been many, many years. What has happened in the world of science and our understanding about CWD that at least has gotten us to this point that you think that a potential vaccine could be on the horizon?
Well, of course, we know that CWD has been around, for several decades now, in Alberta for at least 20 years or more, and certainly in the States before that. So there has been a lot of research going on up to this point in time. And, to be completely honest, our board of directors sat down this past year and looked at, what are the serious issues that are coming up here related to fish and wildlife in the province. And we happen to have come up with extra funding at the end of last year. We had an unexpected increase in number of anglers and hunters during COVID. So we ended up with a surplus at the end of the year, and we thought, well, what's a good way to spend this money? Where should we put it that would be beneficial long-term to the resource that we're trying to manage? And of course, CWD was top of mind for everybody. It's been spreading across the province. It started off along the east side there, along Saskatchewan, and as anybody who has been following it knows, it's been spreading slowly but steadily further and further west across the province.
How is the work going to be divvied up? Do you have experts in different areas that you'll be tapping?
Yeah, so what we did is, after identifying that CWD is an issue, and we're looking at the advances that have been made, to be honest, looking at the advances that have been made in COVID research and how quickly vaccines are developed there and the new technologies. And we wondered, where are we at with something like CWD? We knew that some vaccines had been trialed probably, I think now it's 8 or 10 years ago. And so we were looking at where are the advances. So we actually put out a request for proposal to select, I would say, top of the line researchers across Western Canada, asking them if they wanted to put in proposals. And what happened was those researchers actually all got together and decided that they felt they had a good shot of actually developing something if they worked together. And so they submitted one single proposal to us with 5 top researchers on that proposal. And the board took a look at it. We got some outside reviews done, and we decided, yeah, this is the way to go. We've got a good shot of making an advance here in developing an oral vaccine for CWD based on the technologies out there and what these researchers think can be done.
Now, I know we're a long ways away from having something produced, but I guess the $64 question is, all right, we come up with the vaccine. How in the world do we get it into the deer population and hopefully curtail the spread?
Well, and that is exactly the issue, right? We're dealing with the reality is we're probably dealing with the easiest part first, developing a vaccine and something that can be taken orally. So our researchers will figure out, how do we get it into a deer that is standing in a pen. The next step obviously will be, okay, how do we get it into wild population? But we've got all kinds of other issues beyond just how do we get it to the deer. Of course, we have all kinds of social issues we'll have to look at as well. How comfortable are people going to be with having something like that potentially spread across the landscape? We'll have to look at that. And of course, there will be all kinds of safety concerns we'll have to address first. And I think we recognize that there's lots of hurdles to overcome, but the first step is to say, okay, we actually have a vaccine that is viable. It'll actually work to, at the very least, slow CWD, if not vaccinate completely against CWD. So if we can do that, that's a first step. And then I imagine there'll be several more years of working on, okay, how do we deal with these other issues? The same types of issues we've seen with COVID, showing that it is safe, trying to convince people it's okay to have. We'll have those same issues when it comes to doing it with deer.
Well, hopefully you won't have deer picketing various.
We might not have deer, but you could just as easily have people being very concerned about, which is understandable, right? If we're talking about, if you step back and think, how do you get it to deer population across the whole province? Well, maybe it's we're spreading it all over the place through pellets, but that's not something that's going to necessarily go over well with people. So we're going to have to really think about, how do we do this in a manner that makes people feel confident at work and feel safe, and it's going to be effective as well. You got to have some way to make your target species actually consume whatever it is you're trying to get them to consume.
Yeah, in all seriousness, how urgent is it that stuff like this is happening, Todd? Where are we at in terms of what appears to be a constant migration of CWD from east to west?
Well, I think it's becoming quite urgent, really. The reality is we can reduce deer numbers through hunting pressure, which will slow the progression of disease. No doubt about it. If you reduce the numbers of individuals out there, it's not going to spread as much, just like any other disease. But for how long? Right? If we don't have a way of eventually stopping the disease, then we have to maintain low densities of our deer populations, maybe our elk, maybe our moose, maybe our caribou, indefinitely. And how do we do that? Well, that might be a technique sort of in the short term to slow the progression of the disease. We right now have nothing in our toolbox to bring out and say, okay, this is how we're going to fix the problem. And we're hoping that developing a vaccine will allow that to be there in the toolbox as another management technique that can be used by the government to eventually eliminate the disease on the landscape.
Has there been any alterations or adjustments to the public health guidelines surrounding hunting and deer consumption?
Not as far as I'm aware. I think I'm pretty sure Canada Health is still recommending that if you have a positive deer, then you shouldn't eat the deer. Although I haven't seen any evidence that says it jumps from deer to people, but precautionary principle, they're suggesting you don't consume the meat. So I guess that's that would be the other direction to go if we're able to prove that in fact CWD can't impact people. Well, maybe that makes this whole issue disappear. But I think we're probably better off trying to find a vaccine for CWD than we are trying to prove that it won't impact people at any point in the future.
And I guess just finally, before I let you go, do you have any sense of timelines, Todd, when things really get rolling in earnest on the development of a potential vaccine?
So this is 5 years of funding, and it's going to start here April 1st. And so we've got the University of Saskatchewan, the University of Calgary, University of Alberta, and University of British Columbia all involved. And so those 4 institutions and the researchers there will be coordinating their project. We will get yearly updates. So at the end of each funding cycle, we will get an update of where we're at. The researchers have done a really good job of putting together an outline for us as to what they think can be accomplished on a year-to-year basis. So we'll be able to use that to say, yeah, we're on track with getting to the final product. And the final product will be a test on penned deer to see whether or not we can stop CWD from spreading within those deer. And so hopefully 5 years from now, we'll be having this conversation saying, yeah, we've done some tests, it's successful. So now, the next stage will now be, okay, now we have to deal with the public perception issues, education issues around that, the efficacy of getting it to wild populations. How do we do that? Those kinds of questions after that point. So there will be several phases that we'll certainly have to go through before we get to the point that we can say we've, got a good chance at curing this across the whole province.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating journey. Look forward to checking in with you from time to time to see where the developments are leading. Todd, thanks so much for bringing us up to date on this interesting story.
Thank you.